Let's count sheep together. On a warm, sunny, and peaceful day, you can see a vast plateau spread out before you with one sheep leisurely grazing. A gentle breeze softly sways the grass. A second sheep appears, joining the first one. The two sheep leisurely graze, basking in the sunlight. After a while, a third sheep joins. The three sheep gather together, huddling in the meadow. As time passes, a fourth and fifth sheep peacefully join them, forming a small flock of 5. A sixth sheep joins the leisurely flock. On the green carpet-like meadow, the small flock begins to scatter. A seventh sheep is seen standing on a distant hill. A gentle breeze blows through the grassland, gently stroking the landscape. The eighth sheep sees two sheep in the flock snuggling their faces into each other's wool. A lovely scene spreads out. The ninth sheep is on a slope, where a small flock is grazing slowly in the sunlight. The 10th sheep's faint bleating seems to be carried by the wind, creating a sense of comfort. The 11th sheep, with two sheep cuddling their fluffy bodies, leaves an impression. The 12th sheep appears, showing a landscape of small flocks scattered over the hills. The 13th sheep, on a distant hill, reveals the outlines of the flock. The 14th sheep shows a leisurely movement of the flock, like small waves. The 15th sheep, pausing for a moment, catches the eye, standing in the sunlight. The 16th sheep harmonizes with the scattered small flocks on the green carpet-like hill. The 17th sheep's bleat, carried by the wind, is comforting, and the surrounding flocks take a moment to rest. The 18th sheep, in the flock moving along the slope, includes a lamb. The 19th sheep, in the valley, creates a small flock that huddles together, grazing like a single unit. The 20th sheep connects the large flock on the distant hill with the small flock nearby through the wind currents. The 21st sheep is lying on the grass, stretching and relaxing. The 22nd sheep shows sheep gently touching each other within the small flock, resting. The 23rd sheep joins the flock moving along the slope, connecting to the larger flock. The 24th sheep shows the fluffy outline of the large flock emerging from the distant hill. The 25th sheep, with the flock scattered across the grassland, is passed by a pleasant breeze. The 26th sheep, standing in the sunlight, catches the eye. The 27th sheep moves like a small flock crawling up the hill's slope. The 28th sheep harmonizes with the sound of sheep bleating and birds chirping carried by the wind. The 29th sheep lies stretched out on the grass, relaxing. 30 sheep stand on the hill. The 31st sheep joins, becoming part of the leisurely flock. The 32nd sheep's scattered bleats are carried by the wind. The 33rd sheep stands out, grazing in the distant meadow. The 34th sheep sees the sheep gently touching each other within the flock. The 35th sheep shows small flocks beginning to be seen on the hillside. The 36th sheep sees the grass swaying in the wind, gently moving the sheep's wool. The 37th sheep is leisurely grazing, basking in the sunlight. The 38th sheep sees fluffy flocks appearing from the distant hill. The 39th sheep sees sheep cuddling close together like a single mass nearby. The 40th sheep sees small flocks scattered across the green carpet-like hill. The 41st sheep sees small flocks slowly moving up the hill's slope. The 42nd sheep hears sheep bleating, carried by the wind from both near and far. The 43rd sheep sees the sun gently wrapping the sheep's bodies. The 44th sheep, standing on the hill, surveys the surroundings, leaving an impression. The 45th sheep sees sheep touching each other's wool within the flock. The 46th sheep sees a leisurely movement like small ripples through the flock. The 47th sheep finds a sheep standing in the meadow. The 48th sheep sees the fluffy outline of the flock clearly from the distant hill. The 49th sheep hears occasional bleats carried by the wind. The 50th sheep sees small flocks scattered across the hillside gradually growing. The 51st sheep sees a large flock standing on the distant hill, basking in the sunlight. The 52nd sheep sees a sheep lying stretched out on the grass, relaxing. The 53rd sheep sees the fluffy outline of the flock appearing and disappearing from the distant hill. The 54th sheep hears the small flocks listening intently to the bleats carried by the wind. The 55th sheep sees a sheep quietly grazing within the flock moving along the slope. The 56th sheep sees flocks scattered across the grassland, harmonizing like a green carpet. The 57th sheep sees the distant and near flocks slowly connecting through the wind. The 58th sheep sees a sheep standing in the sunlight, catching the eye. The 59th sheep sees a small flock on the slope, resting with their heads together. The 60th sheep sees a large flock covering the entire distant hill like a fluffy blanket. The 61st sheep sees a large flock on the distant hill, basking in the sunlight. The 62nd sheep sees a sheep grazing in a relaxed posture within the nearby small flock. The 63rd sheep hears faint bleats carried by the wind. The 64th sheep sees two sheep touching each other's wool within the flock moving along the slope. The 65th sheep sees small flocks scattered across the grassland, grazing at a leisurely pace. The 66th sheep sees a large flock at the foot of the distant hill. The 67th sheep catches the eye, standing in the sunlight. The 68th sheep sees sheep snuggling close to each other within the small flock, resting. The 69th sheep sees the fluffy outline of the flock appearing and disappearing from the distant hill. The 70th sheep sees the flock scattered across the grassland, bathed in the pleasant breeze. The 71st sheep sees the sun gently wrapping the sheep's bodies. The 72nd sheep sees the small flock moving along the hillside gradually growing. The 73rd sheep sees the distant large flock and the nearby small flock slowly connecting through the wind. The 74th sheep, standing and looking around, leaves an impression. The 75th sheep sees sheep snuggling together within the small flock, like a single mass. The 76th sheep sees the grassland bathed in a soft reddish hue as dusk approaches. The 77th sheep hears the sheep bleating, blending into a soothing harmony carried by the wind. The 78th sheep sees the large flock on the distant hill standing clearly in the sunlight. The 79th sheep sees a sheep standing up and stretching within the small flock, looking cute. The 80th sheep sees the flock scattered across the grassland, sparkling in the lingering light of the sunset. The 81st sheep sees two sheep gently standing close together on the hillside. The 82nd sheep hears bleats carried from the distant flock to the nearby flock, connecting through the wind. The 83rd sheep sees the flock's silhouette emerging clearly against the sunset sky. The 84th sheep sees the sun setting, casting a soft reddish hue over the sheep's wool. The 85th sheep sees the small flock crawling up the hillside, leaving an impression. The 86th sheep sees the large flock's outline glowing in the sunset from the distant hill. The 87th sheep sees a sheep lying stretched out on the grass, showing a relaxed posture. The 88th sheep sees sheep snuggling close to each other within the small flock, resting together. The 89th sheep hears the sheep's bleats blending into the twilight, carried by the wind. The 90th sheep sees the flock scattered across the hillside, bathed in the afterglow of the sunset, merging into a single entity. The 91st sheep sees a gentle breeze blowing through the flock scattered across the grassland. The 92nd sheep sees the sheep's wool tinged with a soft reddish hue as dusk approaches. The 93rd sheep sees a large flock moving towards us from the distant hill. The 94th sheep hears harmonious bleats carried from near and far. The 95th sheep sees the sun setting behind the hill, casting a soft glow over the sheep's wool. The 96th sheep sees the distant and nearby flocks slowly connecting through the wind currents. The 97th sheep sees the hillside covered in a green carpet, scattered with small flocks. The 98th sheep sees the leisurely grazing, bringing quiet peace to the heart. The 99th sheep hears the surrounding grassland scenery and the sheep's bleats carried by the wind, bringing quiet contentment. A large flock of 100 sheep stands together. The large flock on the hill, and the small flocks in the valley and on the slopes, seem to melt into the landscape. The entire hillside is covered in green, with a large fluffy flock spread out. Now, we have counted 100 sheep. The sheep are grazing deliciously. You can sleep peacefully now.